The Battle of Manzikert, which transpired in 1071 AD, was more than just a siege. It was the beginning of a conflict that altered the course of human events. The Battle of Manzikert was a turning point in history, on par with the earlier conflicts of Hattin and Ain Jalut, where the region felt its effects for centuries afterward. For this reason, a cursory look at Sultan Alp Arslan's life is quite important to assess the results of this highly important moment with any degree of accuracy. Today, we are going to take you down memory lane of the events that transpired during the Battle of Manzikert. Here's what happened. It all started in the era of the 1060s, when Seljuk Sultan Alp Arslan sanctioned the migration of his Turkish supporters into Armenia and Asia Minor, where they attacked cities and stole farmland. Not to forget, but at that time, the city of Ani, the Armenian capital, was utterly devastated, especially in 1064. And although Romanus IV conducted an expedition against the Turks and took the city of Hierapolis, his infantry was too sluggish to catch the swift Turkish cavalry. So, how did Alp Arslan come to be the leader and creator of new principles that he was, and the catalyst for the great fight of Manzikert? Because Tuğrul Bey, the real founder of the Seljuk Empire, did not have a direct heir to the throne, a power struggle sprang out after his death in 1063. Minister Nizam al-Mulk was then famed for his wit, clout, and cunning, which ultimately aided in the selection of his nephew Muhammad Alp Arslan. And, of course, just like his uncle Tuğrul Bey, Alp Arslan was a daring and skilled commander, as he adopted a policy of first cementing his control in the Seljuk-dominated region. Meanwhile, before undertaking any exterior conquests, he spent nearly 7 years solidifying his rule and the stability of the state from the inside. Although many Turkish clans moved to various areas of eastern Anatolia after the conflict, many Turkish historians regard the Battle of Manzikert to be the beginning of the conquest of Anatolia and its transformation into a permanent homeland for the Turks. In this way, the first era of Turkish emirates in Anatolia also began. But it wasn't until 1070 that Romanus launched a second expedition to the city of Manzikert in the region of eastern Turkey, today commonly known as Malazgirt, a Byzantine bastion that had been conquered by the Seljuks and offered peace with Arslan, the Seljuk Sultan. This meant that if Arslan were to end his siege of Edessa, Romanus would return Hierapolis to him. As Romanus already knew Arslan would reject his offer, he went ahead and mobilized his army in preparation for the Battle of Manzikert. Thus, following this bizarre occurrence, came the beginning of the Battle of Manzikert preparations, when the groundwork for what was to come and how it would be carried out was prepared. Andronicus Ducas, a long-time opponent of the emperor, was surprisingly invited to travel with Romanus. And, even though Nicephorus Botaniates was more devoted to Romanus than Ducas, Romanus nonetheless sent him home to avoid suspicion, and ended up losing his best commander. About 5,000 Byzantine troops from the western provinces, and probably the same number from the eastern provinces, crafted up the army, along with 500 mercenaries from the Franks and Normans, led by Roussel de Balliol, as well as mercenaries from Turkey, Bulgaria, and the Pechenegs region, infantry led by the Duke of Antioch, a contingent of Armenian troops, and some, but not all, of the Varangian Guard. There were also reportedly around 200,000 troops, according to Turkish reports. Other estimates put this number closer than 40,000. Not to mention, but, according to Gibbons, this was the greatest army the Roman Empire had ever fielded in the east or the west. From here onwards, the lengthy and arduous march across Asia Minor was made even more onerous by Romanus' decision to bring a sumptuous baggage train along with him. The Byzantine populace also suffered some looting at the hands of Romanus' German mercenaries, whom he was eventually compelled to fire. As a result, the group stopped for the night at Sebastia on the Ales before continuing to Theodosiopolis in June of 1071. There, a few of his generals allegedly proposed pressing on into Seljuk territory to surprise Arslan before he was ready. Nonetheless, some generals, such as Nicephorus Bryennius, advocated staying put and reinforcing their position. After some deliberation, it was eventually agreed to keep through with the march. So, Romanus marched toward Lake Van, assuming he could easily retake Manzikert and, if necessary, the neighbouring citadel of Kleat without any interference from Alp Arslan, who he now believed to be either further away or not coming at all. But Arslan and 30,000 of his horsemen from Aleppo, Mosul, and the rest of his troops were already in Armenia. Needless to say, Arslan's spies were aware of Romanus' whereabouts at all times. But Romanus had no idea what his opponent was up to, and while Romanus and the remainder of the army marched to Manzikert, he gave orders for General John Tarchoniades to lead a contingent of Byzantine and Varangian soldiers to join the Pechenegs and French in Kleat. This likely resulted in a halving of the army, or 20,000 soldiers. No one knows for sure what became of Tarchoniades and his division after this, but they apparently saw the Seljuks and escaped, as they later showed up at Melitene having avoided the combat. Despite hearing about Tarchoniades' defeat, Romanus pushed on to Manzikert, which he conquered without much trouble on August 23rd. The next day, Bryennius led a group of explorers on a search for food, who stumbled into the Seljuk force and were subsequently compelled to retire to Manzikert. Yet, Romanus did not believe this was Arslan's complete force, so he sent out the Armenian commander Basilis with some cavalry. Of course, as a result of his gullibility, the cavalry was defeated, and Basilis was captured. But then, on August 25th, some of Romanus' Turkish mercenaries met their Seljuk ancestors and deserted. Tarchoniades was obviously no longer in the area when Romanus tried to summon him after he had previously refused a Seljuk embassy. There were, as a result, no conflicts that day, but on August 26th, the Byzantine army assembled itself into a true combat configuration and began to march on the Turkish lines.
Units, take formation!
With the left wing under Bryennius, the right wing under Theodore Alyates, and the centre under the Emperor, where the rearguard forces were commanded by Andronicus Doukas. As this was going on, Arslan had the Seljuks form a crescent formation approximately 4 kilometers away to keep an eye on things. So, when Seljuks approached, they launched a series of arrow attacks on the approaching Byzantines, with the crescent centre constantly retreating, while the wings advanced to encircle the enemy.
Units, forward!
Eventually, the Byzantines held off the arrow strikes and took Arslan's camp by the end of the afternoon. When individual battalions attempted to drive the Seljuks into pitched combat, the right and left wings nearly disintegrated under the weight of the arrows. Simultaneously, Romanus had to command a retreat by nightfall because the Seljuks had avoided conflict. The right wing, however, misunderstood the order, and Ducas, an opponent of Romanus's, marched back to camp outside Manzikert rather than covering the emperor's departure. With the Byzantines thus befuddled, the Seljuks saw their chance and launched an assault. While the right wing of the Byzantine army collapsed, the left wing, led by Bryennius, hung on for a while longer before succumbing as well. Later, the Seljuks found Romanus, who they promptly captured after they realized he was injured. After the war, Romanus IV was brought before Alp Arslan, where he was treated with great kindness and presented with the terms of peace he had proposed before the conflict. Alp Arslan even had a military guard respectfully accompany him as he delivered gifts to his men. Unfortunately for Romanus, the mercy of Alp Arslan proved to be a curse, as he was ousted, binned, and finally killed by his men after enduring unimaginable torture and suffering at the hands of his nemesis. Later accounts drastically overstate the number of troops and the number of losses. But it is clear that Manzikert was a disaster for the empire at the time. Historians of the Byzantine Empire even frequently referred back to that day as the disaster that marked the beginning of the empire's decline. Yet, the Crusades against the Muslim world didn't begin until after the Battle of Manzikert was won. The decline of the Byzantine Empire and the rise of the Seljuk state meant that Western Europeans could no longer count on Byzantium and Rome to keep the Muslims out of Europe. Therefore, it started thinking about conquering on its own. And, in response to a call from Pope Urban II in 1095, the First Crusade then took place. With that, we hope to have enlightened you about the historical Battle of Manzikert, inside and out. You can also show us your support by hitting the bell icon, so that we can keep you posted with our future content.